At NIF, we celebrate Pride and we understand Pride in terms of its origins as a site of protest. And of course, we don't just see that as historical protest, we see that as continued necessary protest in the times that we live in. And I'm so glad to have with us today two leaders who really embody that understanding of pride as protest and as pride as joy, really the two what I see as the main dimensions of pride. And those leaders are Rom Ohayyon, who is the co-CEO of IGI, Israel's LGBTQ youth organization, and Jaimie Krass, the president and CEO of Keshet, a US-based organization working for full LGBTQ equality in Jewish life. And I should share for full disclosure that I was the founding CEO of Keshet and led the organization for 24 years. So it is an organization I know quite well and got to work very closely with Jaimie for my last 6 years at Keshet. So it's particularly sweet, Jaimie, to have you with us today. So today's conversation will be rooted in the dynamics that we're all wrestling with in the present, dynamics of democratic backsliding, dynamics of attempts by both Israeli and US governments to crush dissent, to attack civil rights, including LGBTQ rights. We're seeing in the States really unprecedented attacks on the very humanity of transgender people, particularly transgender youth. So you will hear about that, and you will hear about all of that in the broader backdrop within Israel now of renewed attacks over the weekend with Iran, the context of ongoing continued bloodshed and increased settler violence, and the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and again, the relentless attacks on civil rights, including LGBTQ rights. And in the United States, it's against the backdrop of the really crushing attacks on so many minority rights, on immigrant rights and people of color, and LGBTQ people, chief among them. And it's in the context of really unprecedented in our lives anti-Semitism in the United States and globally. So all of this makes it, in some ways, a serious pride, a tense pride, um, a time to be aware of what there is to protest, a time to be connected to our sense of resilience as an LGBTQ community historically and continuously today. I use the word crushing before to refer to the attacks, but the reality is these attacks are not ultimately crushing and we are not defeated. And it's because of leaders like Rom and Jaimie that I know we will not be defeated. So let's turn to them now. The three of us are going to be in conversation, and then there'll be time for your questions. So as always, please feel free to use the Q&A function. So I want to turn first to Rom. And before I ask you the question, Rom, that I'll also ask Jaimie, I just want to check in with you as someone who lives in Tel Aviv and who I knew had to run to your bomb shelter yesterday. How are you and how is your family? How are you holding up?
Well, hi everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm very excited. So yes, we had a sleepless night again. Um, I think for me, it's mostly by now it's pretty frustrating. My family is safe, and we have a bomb shelter inside our home, which makes us very lucky. But every time a war starts, our small home becomes like a community shelter for many friends, whether they're employees or volunteers or community members who do not have this privilege and have to just get along financially in terms of accommodation, what to do with their kids. I was with my baby child most of the day. And I think that the main feeling here is that we're kind of being used. We don't understand. I can't understand why are we still at war. This seems like a war that the Israelis are not getting anything out of by now, not any security wise. And of course, the civil society is just being held as hostage to fight to a fight that we're not part of and we're not gaining anything about. So I think it's mainly frustration and thoughts about current week, what is going to happen in terms of Pride. A lot of our partnerships, campaigns, events were just canceled, even if we're only fighting for one day. Just today, like 4 different workshops were canceled. It's money that we've spent to getting ready for Pride, buses, and like so we don't know if we're going to have to cancel or no. But you know,
Well,
keeping fingers crossed.
yes, and we'll be doing that for you, most of all for your safety, but also for the sake of the community. So let's talk about the community. I'd love for you to briefly introduce yourself and Iggy and say, what Iggy does, but really do so through the lens of a couple of stories that you think really encapsulate the impact of the organization.
Sure. Okay. So first of all, I'm Rom. I'm a co-executive director of Iggy. I've been involved in Iggy for the last 11 years. I've been an active member in the community for the last 15 years since I finished my IDF service. I started volunteering in one of our youth centers that Iggy operates called the Bar Noir, which is known for a shooting that occurred there. And I joined as a volunteer, and I kind of fell in love with working with LGBTQ teens. It also gave a place for my LGBTQ identity. I come from a Moroccan family, half of it very conservative, does not speak to me, does not acknowledge my partner or my child. But I found a place to gain a community and to give back something. So I think this is kind of also the story of Iggy. It's the organization we're celebrating 26 years this year, founded in 2002, and it is basically the largest LGBTQ organization in Israel today, focusing on teens and young adults. At the start, Iggy was more focused on teens, and we have today, our motto is we are here and everywhere. And the first story that I think could show this is our uh, it, throughout the years, our fight to be able to open an Iggy group where teens could come for free, find a space where they could be anonymous and like see with their own eyes other teens their age talking about these issues, asking questions, even if it's only for the first time, and it's very gentle and receiving some kind of guidance. So we really wanted this to happen everywhere in Israel and not only in Tel Aviv, which was kind of is known as the main bubble for the safe haven for LGBTQs. And today we operate in 52 municipalities, more than 100 groups. And the nice story about this is how our fight to be located everywhere and talk about the local gravity of having something close to my home, feeling that my own city is accepting me as has today. We were able with the last government to secure funds through the Ministry of Social Equality to actually create a staff member in the municipality for LGBTQ communities locally. 92 of them were located. Just this Pride in Jerusalem last Thursday, all of them received an email from the current minister of the Ministry of Social Equality saying that their budget is cut. And they might be fired. So this is an ongoing, like we're getting somewhere. There is an Iggy group everywhere in almost every city in Israel, and we have been able to secure funding through the government, which was a result of a very good civil fight, but it could be taken away very easily. And throughout the years, we've opened also frameworks and a more broader social movement also for Iggy alumni and for adults. We called it Merima. I was one of the founders. And a group of kind of people who got to the age of 18 and said, okay, now I'm 18, I don't need it, but I want Iggy also in my adult life. And this organization Merima, this social movement is a house, is a political house for LGBTQs, and it also is more oriented towards changing, is more vocal about critical thinking about Israel today, and is more vocal in terms of policy wise. And Merima has been leading for the last 3 years almost all demonstrations going on in Israel. And one of the best stories that I really, really like, the day of the swearing of the current government in 2022, I think. We understood that this is going to be the most far-right extreme government. Avi Maoz, who was part of the Noam party, who really their only ideology was anti-LGBTQ, and Smotrich and Ben Gvir, they were going to be the government. We understood that, and the LGBTQ community, with Iggy and Merima leading, organized a demonstration on the day of the government sworn. And we, like, before anyone kind of understood what's going on, before the feminist organizations, before civil rights organizations, we had this in front of the Kiryah in Tel Aviv. And I remember we came there like a group from Iggy, and we're like, this is not yelling what we want to say enough. And we were like looking at each other, and we were like, okay, we're going to the highway. And we went down to Ayalon, which is the main highway through Tel Aviv. It's become a symbol by now. And we hold hands. And I remember we were thinking to ourselves, should we wear an Iggy shirt or a Merima shirt? Because we want to keep like Iggy also like a more, at the end of the day, we receive funding from the Ministry of Education. What kind of shirt? And I remember I was buckling down my shirt. I was like, okay, I don't know if we're going to be arrested. Don't want to be arrested with an Iggy t-shirt. And we were stopping the road, and the screen on the main channel, like the 12th channel in Israel that night, was half a screen the government sworn, half a screen Ayalon with pride flags, and it did become every Saturday for till today. Like the LGBTQ community at that moment understood what was going to happen, understood that the rights that we would be losing would affect the whole Israel society. And we were kind of the first ones to look at the picture like this. So I didn't say anything about what Merima is doing today, but this is kind of two stories that I think could give you a grasp of what we're doing.
Thank you so much. I love that you brought in your sibling organization, Merima. I'm sure we'll hear more about Merima's work. I know that I will forever remember that image of the split screen of the government being sworn in, and the voice of those who were really speaking with a different kind of integrity on the other side. So thank you for sharing that. So I'd love to invite Jaimie now to swap in for Rom on the screen. And Jaimie, to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and Keshet, and to share a couple of stories that for you really typify Keshet's work and inspire you about Keshet's impact.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Idit. I'm so grateful to be here, and this conversation is already really refilling my cup. So very, very much grateful to be here. Before I actually dive into introducing myself and sharing that story, Rom, I need to send you a photo I took when I was in Israel in June 2024. I went to the protest that happens every Saturday, like you were just describing. And at that night, it had been the largest up until that point. Of course, it grew even larger afterwards. But I ended up behind what I think was either a Merima or Iggy group. It was a massive group, pride flags everywhere, and that was where I ended up. And I found that it was your group that was really leading most of the chants at that protest. It was such an incredible moment. So I'll send that to you, and you'll probably recognize a bunch of people in there. And I was really grateful to have been able to find the LGBTQ group or a group of LGBTQ individuals that night. So hi everyone, I'm Jaimie Krass. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to share a little bit of an overview of Keshet's work before I dive into those two stories that I'm bringing to us today. So Keshet, as Idit already mentioned, is a US-based organization that works for the full equality of LGBTQ Jews and our families in Jewish life and in broader society here. And we do that through a variety of different programmatic approaches. Our education and training team works with Jewish institutions to equip them with the skills that they need to foster LGBTQ belonging within their communities. Our community mobilization team inspires Jewish communities to turn out for LGBTQ rights and take action for our rights and our vibrant future. And our youth programs team and our LGBTQ Jews of Color programs teams, they create by and for youth and LGBTQ Jews of Color spaces in which folks can experience full belonging, joy, and community, and feel seen and valued as their full authentic selves. So that's the sort of overview of Keshet. And the two stories that I want to share are really going to zoom in a bit more on that youth programs focus, because we're here to especially uplift the importance and the power of youth leadership in our shared pursuit of justice. So to set the stage a little bit, there are two trans teens that I've had the privilege of getting to know and work with. I used to be Keshet's director of youth programs. So that's also why I'm able to bring some more of the personal stories of some of the incredible leaders we've had the chance to work with. So two trans teens in Texas who first got connected to Keshet's programs through different ways, through our online affinity spaces that we host weekly, and also through the collaborations we do with youth movements here, Jewish youth movements here, like NIFTY. These two teens, they got involved in our programs and didn't know each other at all. And and while we know that our programs, because we've assessed this data over time, we know that our programs inspire the vast majority of youth participants to take action in their own communities. Over 70% take action in their own communities after participating in our program. And beyond that, those who've participated 5 to 8 years ago end up actually working in Jewish communities or volunteering weekly in Jewish community organizations. So just to shed a little light on that leadership pipeline. So I got to know these two teens and I thought, we need to introduce them to each other. There is such an incredible energy behind what these folks are bringing to our programs. What might happen if we put them in touch with each other? So I introduced them over email. And before I tell you what happened next, I'm actually going to read to you an email that they sent to me just about 6 months after that introduction. They wrote, "Thank you so much for introducing the two of us. We've really raised hell in Texas politics. Last Tuesday, we brought students from all over Texas to meet with legislators, to advocate, and to learn. We've spent countless hours speaking to politicians and finding ways to bring more young people into the legislative process to help make change. We have protested at the Capitol together, testified in committee, and introduced each other to incredible people in the queer political world. Keshet played a huge part in that, and so we wanted to say thank you." These teens founded an organization called SEAT, Students Engage in Advancing Texas. And that organization has become one of the leading plaintiffs in numerous cases challenging Texas's regressive politics, regressive policies on education and LGBTQ rights and the intersection between the two. That's what can happen when we are centering youth leadership in our very programs that we're designing ourselves and equipping them with the skills and the sense of power and the sense of inhabiting their own power. And then they're able to bring that to their own home communities and take it all the way up to the state and now also the federal level. These teens have also testified before the U.S. Senate in defense of their rights. So one snapshot of that kind of potential that lies at the core of when we prioritize youth leadership in this way. Another example is sort of a different side of that coin that I want to share. So this past spring, NYU Langone, which is a massive hospital system here in New York City where I am based, they, without any warning or notice, suddenly discontinued gender-affirming care for individuals ages 18 and under. A couple days later, we hosted our weekly hangout on Zoom for teens, for LGBTQ Jewish teens that we've been hosting for years and happens every single week. We received an email during that program from a parent. And she wrote, "I can hear my 14-year-old trans kid laughing and talking on the Zoom hangout in her bedroom. And it is such an amazing thing. It's been a terrible week with learning that NYU will no longer provide her health care. Hearing her giggle is lightening my terror, and the first time I felt I could take a breath all week." So when we are centering the needs and experiences of youth in our work, the impacts of that have a ripple effect on others that refills their cups, that ensures that they can keep going, keep breathing, because we know that the responsibility of fighting for the affirming and just world we all deserve cannot just rest on one demographic, one population within our community. So it's an example of how not just youth leadership, but also prioritizing youth joy and belonging also aids in that broader picture of the pursuit for justice. I'll stop there.
Amazing. All right, let's bring Rom back so the three of us can leap into conversation together. Um, so one of the reasons that I wanted to be in conversation with the two of you, of course, is because the two of you are both powerful queer leaders and you work with youth and see the power of youth. So I'd love to ask, what do you hear from the young people with whom you work about the impact of the democratic backsliding that's all around them, the impact of the attacks on civil rights broadly, the attacks specifically on LGBTQ rights? How does it affect them? How does it show up in their lives? And how do you see them responding? Rom, you want to start?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I also realized I did not give in any kind of data in terms of numbers wise. So I'll do a brief kind of number just to understand kind of the different scope of Iggy and Merima's work. So we have the youth groups operating weekly, just like any other youth movement, you would say. We reach more than 4,000 youth through these 110 groups with also unique spaces for LGBTQs from teens and young adults from the Haredi society, Orthodox, Ethiopian heritage, and Arab. So different frameworks, different languages, trying to be relevant. Most of these groups are led by volunteers. Half of the volunteers today are 18 years old and under. So these are actually leaders from within our youth system who grew throughout the years. And a couple of years ago, we've understand that we have to go into schools exactly because this kind of feeling that we are not getting anywhere in terms of violence, in terms of bullying. In Israel, currently, the Ministry of Education does not collect any data about violence towards teens or LGBTQ individuals in any kind of system. So we decided to open a research center 20 years ago, which is the only one who is collecting data about this. And we can see the 20 years of picture by now, every 4 years collecting more than 1,000 student questionnaires about their how they're feeling in the IDF, how they're feeling in the university, how they're feeling in school system. And we see how little Israel has done to change the reality for these teens. And our decision to go into schools and also work with staff, workshops with students, was the understanding that most of their day they're spending in school. But this is also something that we did receive some kind of funding, but this is a continuing fight between us and the Ministry of Education, and it's also it's not mandatory in any way. But today we do reach more than 35,000 students and staff members, but it's only the tip of the iceberg. Okay, it's around 160 high schools and middle schools in Israel, and the effect of the current situation for LGBTQ teens who suffer 2 to 3 times more violence in their schools, and even more after October 7th, and I'll tell a bit more about that. Is that the effects continue when we expect them to be independent citizens, reaching 18, we expect them to kind of blend into the frameworks, to whether the IDF or getting a degree and starting a job, but they're not there because either they're very preoccupied about how they're getting their gender reaffirmation processes, or they have no diploma from high school because they didn't even come because there was no bathroom they could use or no teacher they could talk about. So we find them not finding themselves also in the job, in the workspace, and we've opened the first ever vocational rehabilitation college for LGBTQs called the Marsha College, which is today 5 years of already running this amazing framework. And in terms of Merima, then we have programs for adults who want to be active members in changing the reality. We have a Center for Political Education, creating all kinds of courses and groups for teaching, also Arab and Jewish LGBTQs, for action, for activism. and also from local communities around Israel. And to be an LGBTQ in Israel for the last couple of years is really being kind of caught in the middle. On the one hand, you're always being told by the Israeli government and media, Israel is the best place in the Middle East. You're supposed to be happy. You're supposed to be okay. This is go to Gaza. That was a good curse during October 7th. But on the other hand, when you look inside of Israel, you see no legislation promoting LGBTQ rights since 1999, more or less. No budget towards LGBTQ organizations. This year only from IGI, we have been taken more than 1 million, 1.5 million shekels from our 2026 budget by different Ministry of Education, Ministry of Social Equality. So we're kind of feeling we have been used for foreign affairs issues, but our actual lives of a teen in Beersheba or in Jerusalem, of course, if he's from the Haredi school system or from even just geosocial periphery, more conservative family, is just hell. Like he can't go to school, he can't find himself as an adult. He would probably financially he would have problems for a very long time. This discrimination is we are paying prices for them, and I'm seeing how the community is paying prices for them. Even my closest friends who are more, let's say, privileged, they're paying prices in trauma, they're paying prices in substance use, in the inability to just find a stable life. And a lot of them just decide if they can not to live in Israel. And then we are losing really, really amazing citizens, whether because they've been discriminated as a teen and whether just our liberal group is going back. And I think this is also true for all civil society. Since October 7th, the government in Israel has not been able to do stuff that they were supposed to do, and civil society took its place. We have been giving food packages and food stamps and going visiting LGBTQs in their houses and sending packages to teens, trying to think whether they're closeted or not, so we could put an Iggy on it or not, so when their parents open the door, that like things that you even couldn't imagine, while being also kind of picked by all kinds of commissions in the Knesset, trying to take away our tax rights, trying to battle us in different conversations about we are going into school systems and bringing foreign agendas. At the end of the day, an LGBTQ teen in Ashkelon has been asked if she's part of Hamas because she's queer. Okay, so we're too queer for Israel, but we're too Israeli for the queer community outside of Israel. We're being used by the Israel government sometimes to make Israel look better, but we're not getting funding about it. We're not getting any help for actually like holding in there. So the civil society in Israel is really at its end game in terms of battery wise. It's being used again and again for the last 4 years, and we're getting to the end of it. If this is a really dramatic year, if the leadership in Israel will not be changed, then the civil society's resilience cannot hold on anymore. And I'm saying this sadly, but I'm saying it very, very clear. The LGBTQ community, the LGBTQ organizations, and civil rights organization in all are being, on the one hand, used to actually hold the Israel society together, but also being abused by any formal system and delegitimized. And I think this is the main dramatic, I think that I would like to share.
Thanks, Rom. And with your permission, I'll be circling back to you a little later in the conversation to ask about those, equally destructive dual dynamics of, on the one hand, exploitation by the Israeli government, and on the other hand, hostility from some in the queer community, kind of, outside of Israel. So we'll return to that, but thank you so much for sharing. So Jaimie, what are your thoughts around kind of impact on youth, what we're seeing from youth, what we can learn from youth?
Well, Rome, while you were speaking, there were a couple different sort of refrains that just kept repeating themselves in my head. And it was one of them, the first was, our youth do not deserve this. Like, no one deserves this. Our youth do not deserve this. They deserve so much better. And I just kept thinking about that as you were speaking. And then the other piece was there are so many parallels between what the different communities that we are serving right now are experiencing. So when I think about what are the concrete losses, the concrete effects and impacts on LGBTQ youth right now in the US, it's similar to what you were sharing too, loss of access to healthcare, loss of access to educational resources, including not being able to access life-saving websites like the Trevor Project because of their school's internet policy. It includes loss of incredible teachers who've either been fired, like at my high school where I went to school in Florida, which became the first school to fire a teacher under their Don't Say Gay bill for affirming a trans student's name and pronouns. Loss of teachers that way, loss of teachers who've had to move for their own safety because they are LGBTQ themselves. Loss of their home states. We know that hundreds of thousands of LGBTQ families have had to relocate. LGBTQ families and individuals have had to relocate for their own safety to safer states. In fact, Keshet has been providing a resource that has enabled at least 26 households to relocate to safer states through a program with Hebrew Free Loan Society called Move to Thrive, which is an interest-free loan service providing program. So those are some like the devastating concrete losses. And another sort of core takeaway is that LGBTQ communities are often the first to feel when democracy is eroding. And I want to offer a quick little reframe on that. Oftentimes when we're saying something like, democratic backsliding, we're assuming that we were here and now we're here. But it's important to recognize that even when we were here, many of the rights of many minority groups were still not being respected or protected. So it's not as though we were at an ideal and now we're down. It's that we weren't at an ideal and now it's worse. And maybe worse in ways that are more reminiscent of where we've been before, or that are not, that are a totally different flavor of cruelty, which is what it feels like in the United States right now. So that's just some of the pieces. But I also want to share that while, yes, there are all these devastating losses, what I'm seeing amongst many of our youth is extraordinary resilience. I'll share just one more piece that a young person wrote shortly after a devastating Supreme Court decision that essentially constitutionally protected bans against gender-affirming care for minors. And so this young person wrote the following. He wrote, "If trans people could be legislated away, could be made obsolete by hate and fear, this would have happened thousands of times before. But we are still here and fighting, and this is proof that nothing can take us away." So we're not quite at the end yet, but also that is because our organizations are not holding the entirety of civil society the ways that yours are over in Israel.
Well, you might be minimizing your work a bit, Jaimie, because I do know that you are addressing larger anti-democratic trends and attacks on rights as well. But yes, perhaps it's not as comprehensive and totalizing as Rom's experience. But we'll get back to you too. So Rom, you kind of quickly mentioned before the work that IGI does, working with the Arab LGBTQ community in Israel, people who are Palestinian citizens of Israel, which I know is not new. That's not since October 7th, and I imagine that it has been presented all sorts of challenges that have been different than October 7th. If you've been told to go back to Gaza, what are they being told? So tell us a little bit about that work, and how are you negotiating those dynamics now?
Yeah, thanks. So our Arab activity is something that we have decided to open around 10 years ago. It's under the name Alwan, which is colors in Arabic. And it started out as social groups, very, very under radar, always like we had 3 groups in Jerusalem, in Haifa, and in Jaffa, meeting in a very secretive location with security because we did have situations where family members kind of followed the participants trying to understand where they are going or suspicious, and it would be dangerous not only for the young adult or the teen participating, but also for the whole group who would sometimes go or take a bus to the nearest city. Not, of course, we would not open something like that in any kind of village or close to potential people knowing everyone, and it's you really have to know the the social dynamic of a lot of Arab, like the Arab society, and the North is not like the South, and it's not like Jaffa, and we had to find like to tailor-made the relevant group and space for every area. But the thing that we've been tackling with was how do we create a leadership for these groups who would be able to continue working for a couple of years, not only a year or two, when the leaders, the counselors, the volunteers, or the staff members themselves are also are bringing in the trauma and the challenges and the loss of family connections and a lot of time abuse or sexual assaults that they have had to deal with as Arab LGBTQ members. And now we are putting them in a position where they need to lead, they need to give to be there for others. So on the one hand, it's an amazing thing, and on the other hand, there are no cultural leaders for the queer LGBTQ Arab community in Israel, not like the Israeli, the Jewish LGBTQ community has its cultural symbols and has people on TV and has leaders and history. This is something we were trying to actively create with the Alwan staff to create these community activists that could go a long way. And it was something that we were not able to do till the last 3 years. In a weird sense, October 7th kind of pushed us to say we have to put a huge amount of resource to be able to have 5 staff members that this is what they're doing. They're guiding the groups, they're opening courses. We even trying to find a social worker that would speak Arab and that we would feel okay with sending participants to see in it, and we feel safe that they understand what it is to be queer. They are really dealing with from their community, they're outcasts because they're queer. Sometimes they're even criticized because they're working in a fairly Jewish organization like Igir or Merima, which is not on only Arab organizations. So they are fighting that fight, but they're also dealing with a lot of people who are running away from home and are calling them, like we're receiving so many messages, help me, I'm running away from my family. We've helped participants hide in Tel Aviv for numerous times, and sadly we've also lost a lot of participants for family violence, or just even finding themselves with no permits to work in Israel because they're from the West Bank or from East Jerusalem, but also they have to find some place to live and they end up in the sex work circle. So this is really a very fragile dynamic. And if someone hurts them, then they can't go to the police. So we could get phone calls from people attending our events, our holiday events, which is kind of a different, like a chosen family for them, going back home, and we would get a lab which leads the Alwan activity would get a phone call from the police saying, I have here a guy saying that he came from your activity. Tell me that if it's true or not, because I want to arrest him if not. And she says, I'm trying to think what would be better for him to go back home with the policeman saying he was in an Alwan in something from Igi, or for him to get arrested that night and not be taken home by the police, but not being outed in front of his family. So this is the kind of dilemmas that sometimes we have to take in this very weird reality, but we feel responsible, and I think this is a very Israeli and it's different kind of from the dynamics of LGBTQ Jewish organizations. We feel responsible for all LGBTQs in Israel, and we understand that until our community receives equal rights, whether I'm Arab or Jewish and LGBTQ, this is connected. We have a bond on our LGBTQ side, but we also have a bond because we're human beings and we understand what inequality feels like. And it's something that we need to hold together. And it's really hard after October 7th. A lot of the LGBTQ community, the Jewish one, became really racist. People are afraid. They have been attacked. They have lost family members. We have participants that their parents were hostages. Okay, this is the situation where, like, a teen in Kfar Aza, 2 of her grandparents were taken hostage, and reserve duty in our staff, and Julia, who is leading the Jerusalem group, is coming in the office and meeting Ofer after 3 months. He was in reserve duty, and they like each other, and Ofer is also in reserve duty because he believes in peace and he wants to be the one doing the hard work. But at that moment when they're meeting in the office and they don't know if to hug and he's in uniform, and I know what for Julia is to see someone in uniform after what happened to her family like 2 nights back, and I was like, this is a reality that I could, this is a scene that I couldn't even imagine. But these are kind of the tensions that we're trying to hold together.
Scenes you couldn't imagine, yet you figure out how to lead through, which is so extraordinary. So, Jaimie, I know you're not wrestling with the same reality, of course. However, you too, as the leader of an LGBTQ Jewish organization and the leader of an LGBTQ American organization, have been wrestling with other complex, painful layers since October 7th. We all know about the increase and increasing rates of anti-Semitism, which we also, of course, see in the LGBTQ world, and the incredibly fraught, often very painful dynamics around Israel and Palestine within the Jewish community, within the LGBTQ community, within all of our communities. So I invite you to speak to all of that. Yeah, I invite you to speak to kind of how has that shown up for you as a leader? How has that shown up for Keshet broadly? And how are you seeing it hit the lives of our youth?
I'm going to provide a few different examples of how this shows up in our work in the field and has been showing up, especially over the past few years since October 7th. I'm thinking right now of a number of the youth that we serve. And to clarify, when we say youth at Keshet, when we're talking about who's participating in our programs, we mean folks ages 11 to 24. So quite a broad developmental spread. But I'm thinking of the teens and young adults, especially college-age young adults, who've shared that they've felt like they've had to hide or downplay their Jewish identities or their connections to Israel or the fact that they themselves or their parents are Israeli when they're in LGBTQ spaces, or honestly, when they're in a variety of different spaces that are pursuing social justice. And that's heartbreaking because when you pair that experience alongside what I already described, our youth experiencing when it comes to the landscape of LGBTQ rights and the attacks on their rights and their bodily autonomy that are escalating, seems daily, almost hourly in the US, where are they experiencing home? You can see how that compounds each other. And that is extraordinarily painful. And again, something no one deserves. What I'm also seeing, though, is and literally with my own eyes, as few as, what was that, 48 hours ago? What is time? But on Saturday, I marched with the Keshet contingent at Boston Pride. And we were a contingent of, oh my God, 70, 80 LGBTQ Jews and allies marching together. And a number of those same youth who I just described are having that very real, very painful experience in other spaces. We're part of that contingent. And at every single step of that Pride route, we were met with resounding cheers, just limitless enthusiasm and joy for our presence and gratitude. People just shouting to us, "We're so glad you're here. We love you." At one point, there was a crowd chanting, "Gay Jews, gay Jews." There was such effusive support for our presence at every single step of that route. And that's thousands of people showing up in this LGBTQ space for this march during Boston Pride who were expressing that support. And then even after that parade, that route, when we were tabling at the Pride Fest, so we're with hundreds of other organizations, we had, again, dozens and dozens of people coming up to our table, whether because they are LGBTQ and Jewish themselves, or whether because they were just grateful that we were there, and grateful that we were there in spite of what they are also seeing as attacks on and litmus tests and gatekeeping around our identities in spaces like this. It was nothing but joy and nothing but appreciation. So we hold both, right? It's an elu ve'elu. We understand that there are these really painful experiences of isolation going on. And we also understand that queer and trans Jewish joy continues to be possible and experienced in a number of spaces as well. Another sort of layer to this has to do with our coalition work. So the partnerships that we engage in with LGBTQ organizations that work at the national, secular, and interfaith levels, and the ways that we've seen our partners show up with thoughtfulness and care the way that we do. And a part of that is because of the sort of seeds of relationship that we'd been planting for years, including before October 7th. And it's one of the reasons why investing in relationship building with other organizations is so crucial, because it meant that when crisis happened, we already had the relational foundation that ensured that we could lean in to trust and into listening, even when there was rhetoric or behavior that was negating our sense of belonging as Jews in this movement. And that is why we've been able to invest in the kinds of coalitions that lead to, for example, one LGBTQ organization at a Pride March in Florida telling us that if someone tries to attack you, if you feel like your safety is being undermined during this march, we will surround you. Come join us, and we will protect you. That's what solidarity looks like. That's what being in genuine coalition and relationship look like. And that is that is the way that is going to eventually take us to that end goal of a better, more just and more affirming world.
Thank you for sharing those stories, Jaimie. Both what's hard and what's hopeful. And I know it's always a combination.
It has to be.
So speaking of combination, Rom, earlier you kind of referenced, cynical attempts by various Israeli governments, not only the current one, obviously, to exploit advances in LGBTQ rights in Israel kind of as a way to, distract from the injustices of the occupation or other unjust Israeli government policies, which is a dynamic which has led some to kind of wholesale critique everything that is LGBTQ Israel as kind of lacking political integrity. And I would say, do so in a quite, unfair and inaccurate way. But I want to hear what you think about that dynamic and what you seek, as the leader of an Israeli, the largest Israeli LGBTQ rights organization in the country, what you seek from your partners outside of Israel, whether queer Jewish organizations like Keshet or queer organizations more broadly. What is there critique that you seek? Is there solidarity that you seek? What do you hope for?
So I think that for us, our mission in Israel today is pretty clear to us as focused in creating a life that we can stand behind and that we could live inside Israel. And mainly for today, it means fighting forces, very conservative and well-financed forces, from within the Israel society, who also have good friends from outside the Israel society. These forces, they learn from Hungary and from Poland and from Trump, and they receive resources from conservative movements. We see the ideas proliferating into Israel, trying to battle out liberal, pluralistic, or any kind of democratic organization or idea. So these are the forces that at the end of the day affect the lives of most LGBTQs. Ask them if they are loyal, ask them to go away from Israel. We're losing just citizens who are not feeling that Israel is their home, that are just in total despair. So we have to first of all keep them under good condition, okay, create spaces for them, safe spaces, and give them knowledge and create a community of solidarity that could help them, whether it's with a meal or whether it's a place that they could talk and meet each other, and or someone to call to go to their bomb shelter if a war starts. But also we need to mobilize them for action to being the also the community that is the front line of democracy inside of Israel, because the LGBTQ community is the front line of democracy. It's the first one to being hurt by conservative governments all over the world, not only in Israel, because it symbols something. And we are also the first ones who have the responsibility to say something about what is going on and to act. So this is the responsibility that we took for ourselves, to educate our community, to mobilize, to remember people. Listen, if the Supreme Court falls because of judicial overhaul, then you're gonna not have rights on your kid right now, because the rights that you have for your kid are thanks to the Supreme Court and not thanks to the Israeli law. And bring them out to protests or whatever, or go into schools and fight the Ministry of Education to make it mandatory for staff members, for school staff to know what to do with LGBTQ phobia and violence. This is what, at the end of the day, affects the lives of a teen or an adult queer person in Israel. But when I look at what's going on in the US outside of Israel, I really do not envy what you have to go through. It's kind of a different closet. It's a mirror closet. You're thinking twice before you say if you're Jewish, and you need to prove your loyalty to liberal spaces and to pluralistic spaces. And I think this is the fight that you're having, how to keep both of the sides of the rope and not give away any part of what you believe, not the Jewish side or the Israeli side, and not the queer side and the pluralistic side. And this does bring us together. We are saying, no, listen, we're Israeli. We don't have another passport. I'm sorry, most of our community does not have one. But I'm also liberal, and my ideas are leaning on civil movements and pluralistic ideas that we received from Europe and the States, and that's amazing. And I'm not giving away any of these. And I think this is the fight that you're also having, to keep both of these together and to say this is more nuanced than you think. And what I could say is only that I have your back, and I'm really I have a lot of empathy towards the situation that you're in, and I prefer my fight over yours, although it seems strange. And I encourage you to continue. I don't care what you say to any student in Colombia or to any activist. I would not judge anything that you decide to say, and I would not judge if you do not want to put yourself in any kind of advocacy. I'm okay with that. I need to know, and it's really heartwarming and gives so many power to know that there are Jews outside of Israel who understand that Judaism and LGBTQs are not contradicting things, and that Judaism for them is thinking about others and thinking about minorities and promoting human rights. This is something that is really hard to miss when you live in Israel. It's really hard not to remember that this is what Judaism, and it's not by coincidence. They want us not to remember that this is Judaism and not what is going on in the Orthodox parties or people doing horrible things in the name of Judaism. Most of the community members do not know that there is a huge amount of movements and forms of practicing Judaism outside of Israel. So just knowing that you are doing this is reminding us that we are not crazy, but also we need your back, and we need your criticism about Israel. You're a very important part of keeping Israel a democratic and Jewish state, because you are more the U.S. jury and the world jury, the liberal side of it, has to continue fighting and supporting civil society inside of Israel and political parties taking Israel to continue saving it as a Jewish and liberal state. Because if we lose our fight, then you lose your fight, and we're both stuck without a home state. We don't have a Jewish home. I don't have a Jewish home, and my brother doesn't have one because he's married to someone that my family does not consider Jewish, because she's American and only her grandfather was Jewish. So she was Jewish enough for the Nazis, but not for my uncle. And you will not have a home to come to, because Israel does not acknowledge half of New York Jews. So we have to make sure that we win this fight, because it doesn't only matter that there will be an Israel after October 7th and after these wars. It matters what kind of Israel. Would it be a democratic one? Would it be a liberal one? Would it have place for all of us Jews? So this is I don't know if it's an ask, but keep doing what you're doing, and just remember that do this differentiation. The Israel society and Israel democracy is not always the current government, and keep being critical about it and keep supporting oppositional movements today who are doing the best thing for a Jewish state. This is what we should be doing out of love for Israel and for the Jewish state.
The work that you're doing, that you and all of IGGY are doing, is so crucial and so holy. And I've just felt so powerfully inspired as you've been describing all of the many things that you are holding right now and that you are providing towards so many people in need right now. And I love that you touched on exactly why I think like we as the LGBTQ community are so crucial to the fight for any kind of democratic future. And that is that when you were describing those two ropes that we're sort of holding on and trying not to lose, what you're describing is the ways in which so many of the systems in which we are both functioning right now are trying to project a rigid binary onto us, onto our existence, and something that I think makes us inherently and intrinsically powerful in a unique way as LGBTQ people is that our very existence defies binaries. Our very existence models abundance. It models abundance around belonging. It models abundance around liberation. And that is why when we start to see binaries and scarcity mindset informing the ways that both our governments, but also sometimes our partners in this work are approaching the change making work, that's why we have to push against that. Because that is actually antithetical to who we are. That is antithetical to the vibrant future that we know cannot exist without us and without all of the work that we are doing. So we are very much in the exact same fight. And it's crucial that all of us continue to stay in that fight. Like you were saying, we cannot give up. That doesn't mean we can't tend to our own flames. That doesn't mean we can't take a moment to refill our cups and have joyful conversations and experiences. But it does mean that the work continues to exist and we have to continue to be a part of that work. And that's where, like if we want to throw a little bit of some Jewish text in there, that's lo alecha hamlacha likmor velo ata ben chorin levatel mimena. It is not incumbent upon you to complete the work, but nor are you free to desist from it. And that is why conversations like this are so crucial too, that we are leaning in to the energy and the natural synergy that exists in our collective pursuit of that liberation and that justice.
Leave it to the American Jewish Organization to bring a little text in. Thank you, Jaimie. Thank you so much, Rom and Jaimie, both of you. Um, you both lead with ferocity and joy, which, are, I think, really the two core components of pride, the core components of what it means to be queer in this world and relentlessly hopeful and to keep fighting to make a difference. This is work that NIF is proud to support today. We have been supporting the LGBTQ rights movement in Israel since its earliest days, continuing on through just a couple of days ago when, as you may have seen in the news, the Jerusalem Pride March, for the first time, went straight to the Knesset. And it went straight to the Knesset to send a clear message that we, the LGBTQ community, are here and we are demanding a different kind of leadership. We are demanding change. We are fighting for our democracy. And that is also a fundamental part of what it means to be fighting for LGBTQ rights in this country here, where I am now in the United States and in Israel too. I love that I know that IGGY and Keshet are two organizations that have partnership programs from time to time. And so for all of you out there who are interested in seeing more of the magic that we have seen in this conversation today, I can't speak anymore for Keshet, but Jaimie can tell you in the future. I trust that there will be opportunities for the two of them to continue to be in conversation and certainly for their organizations to be in conversation. So thank you to all of you who have joined us today. Thank you for being part of the movement for LGBTQ rights, the movement for democracy, the movement for a better world here in the US and in Israel, a place where youth can have that future that Jaimie mentioned that they so deserve, because of course they so deserve better, where all of us can feel at home, as Rome mentioned, which is so very vital, a place where all of us can live in safety and in dignity. Thank you. Pride Sameach. Happy Pride.
Thank you. Happy Pride, everyone.